Hello, my name is Dale Coy, and I am a retired professor of the humanities and English from the United States. I've taught at Princeton University and the College of New Jersey in Trenton, among other places, and I was honored to be asked to help with the editing of the autobiography of my old friend, Dawit Wolde Georges, who I had the pleasure of working with for his earlier book, Red Tears, back in the 1980s. Dawit has titled his autobiography, What a Life. It's the extraordinary account of a man whose life has been dedicated to the victims of war and natural disaster in Africa. As head of relief in the great Ethiopian famine of 1984 and 85, Dawit fought to save the lives of millions of his countrymen and women when faced with an uncooperative government and an indifferent world. Knowing his life was in danger, he left Ethiopia to write Red Tears, his groundbreaking expose of Ethiopia's communist regime, while working to free Ethiopia from the stranglehold of dictatorship. For the past 30 years, Dawit has devoted his life to helping those most in need throughout Africa. From rebellions in Eritrea, Angola, Liberia, Sudan, and South Sudan, to genocide in Rwanda, Major Dawit has witnessed the horrors of war as a soldier, a diplomat, and a humanitarian. In the end, he was forced to confront the most agonizing battle of all, his faith in a loving God. Dawit's autobiography is a unique account of a man who has seen the best and the worst in Africa. He's worked closely with the giants of African independence, Julius Nyerere, Robert Mugabe, Joshua Nkomo, Sam Nujoma, Samora Machel, John Garang, Oliver Tambo. He's confronted the power-hungry autocrats and tyrants. He's met world leaders like Fidel Castro, Daniel Ortega, Giulio Andreotti, Samuel Doe, Thomas Sankara, Jerry Rawlings, and many others in Europe and South America, including Mother Teresa, whose words to him have left a profound, lifelong impression. Today, he continues to work toward the betterment of the African people as one of the foremost analysts at AISSS, the African Institute of Strategic and Security Studies, where he serves as executive director. Dawit is the author of Red Tears, Kid Bademeret in Amharic, Eskedar, a historical novel in Amharic, and many policy reports and studies on Africa. Dawit has been a visiting fellow at Princeton, the University of Cape Town African Studies Center, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and Boston University African Studies Center.
This brief narrative is about my book titled What a Life. It's written in English because it's not only about Ethiopia, but a significant portion of the book deals with my experience in Africa. Death is beyond us, but life is within our control, and the ultimate measure of a successful life is the way we live it. It's not the dying that matters, it is a journey towards that inevitable end that we need to enjoy, keeping in mind that everything ultimately ends, which should make us think of the legacy we leave behind. I have lived doing and being the best I could. My principle in life, in as much as I can control the situation, has always been to begin every day with the most important thing I want to accomplish. I have lived a life of action and reaction, the better part of it in exile. But the most meaningful part of my life has been in my country, Ethiopia. When I left Ethiopia, my greatest frustration was living behind a helpless population facing enormous suffering. I would have liked to do more of the humanitarian work I had been deeply involved within the preceding years. When I was in Ethiopia, I was lucky to have the kind of career that encapsulated my passion, my purpose in life, my personal essence and qualifications, all in one package, allowing me to exercise all simultaneously. But after I left my country, that all fell apart. While in exile, my body and spirit act for that passion, that desire to make a difference for the suffering people in my country. I was involved in a new career entirely devoid of Ethiopia. But my former career and my passion were fundamental desires within me that were crucial for making me feel complete and whole. I realized I had to make a significant time outside of my career as an international civil servant to channel my desires in ways that did not conflict with my assignments. I therefore spent considerable time, energy, and money doing what was most important to the cause I cherish most, while at the same time earning a living. Though I was far away from Ethiopia, Ethiopia lived in me, and up to the present moment, I have remained involved as an activist and advocate for human rights and human security in my country and in Africa. I have never postponed my priorities to wait for the day of retirement. I have lived life one day at a time, taking up the challenges as they have come. It has been up to me whether to do something with my life or just wait for death to claim it. I chose to live life to the fullest possible extent and leave the rest to God. We cannot expect someone to tell us the purpose of our own lives. We must build our purpose ourselves. Those who waited to be handed a purpose to their lives have failed. I did not wait. I took whatever opportunities came my way and tried to use them to build a meaningful life. That building process was how I defined life, irrespective of the outcome. My life has been driven by two factors: a clear conscience and a sense of fulfillment through benefiting society. After I finished high school and went to the Haile Selassie First Military Academy, I found out that I was becoming less religious than I used to be when I was with my parents. I started smoking and drinking. I was not praying regularly and not reading the Bible as I used to. I was very unhappy with my religious life, particularly when I was in my final year in the military academy. I wrote to my father, who was deeply religious, and told him, quote, "I'm troubled with my life because I'm not as religious as I wanted to be, and you wanted me to be. Many things are disturbing me, and God is not the center of my life. The only thing that guides my life is my effort to have a clear conscience," unquote. I was expecting a harsh letter from my father, but I was surprised when he wrote back to tell me, quote, "If you are guided by your conscience, then you are in God's hands, my son. If you do something against your conscience, then repent and don't lose the courage to admit your failings before God," unquote. He then told me to read a number of passages from the Bible. One of them, 1 Peter 3:16, quote, "Keep a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander," unquote. It was advice I badly needed when I left home for the first time. My father's advice has been my spiritual guiding light to this day. A clear conscience is the only way to be at peace with God and myself. It breeds inner strength and self-confidence, and once you have those, you can move a mountain. The human conscience is evidence of God's existence. Each person's conscience serves to control all the actions and decisions that we make. As controller, the conscience shows which actions and decisions are right and wrong, which should be accepted and rejected, unless that person is mentally ill or not what we consider normal, incapacitated. The Apostle Paul argues that conscience can be overcome by evil desires. In other words, conscience can be dulled to the point that it cannot distinguish between right and wrong, or good and evil. But in due time, conscience will testify before God concerning all our actions. When the commitment to conscience is constantly renewed, then with a clear conscience, people are able to accurately assess their actions, good or bad, fair or unfair. But when I had the power to hurt people, deny their freedom, detain them, and cause suffering, I have chosen to be compassionate and understanding and exercise due process of law. Like in the case of war-ravaged Eritrea, when I was governor with unlimited power, or when I was the commissioner of the RRC during the 1982-85 famine that took the lives of more than 1 million people. In Eritrea, where I was only a civilian governor, we were able to achieve the goal of winning the hearts and minds of people in an enduring way and prove that through compassion and due process of law, the goal of achieving peace can be reached. Many Eritreans may not agree. I never supported secession of Eritrea, a cause for which many, including Eritreans, died. I judge my work in Eritrea, both as a military officer and governor, from the perspective of a unionist, who I was. During the Great Famine in Ethiopia, I could have taken the sides with the regime headed by Mengistu and looked the other way. We did not. My staff and I accepted the command of conscience at the risk of our lives and were able to prevent millions more from dying of starvation. Even after I was grown up, my father also advised me consistently on the virtues of hard, honest work, even if we do not get what we want. That, he told me, is the source of true joy. He told me, duty is not money. Duty is life. Duty is trying your best to achieve. Duty is doing your part to the best of your ability. The rest is God's duty, not yours. My father was an extremely hard-working person who believed that a sense of fulfillment, of duty and obligation to family, government, and society are the greatest enduring sources of happiness on earth. He told me to take time to enjoy what I have and count my blessings before asking for more. He was right, and that's what I did all my life. But this life I lived was not the life of my choice. I never planned or wanted to join the military. I never planned to study law. I never planned to be in politics. Serving in the military eventually became the greatest honor of my life. It was the military trainings and the service I gave and the experience of seeing hundreds and thousands dying and being injured for the unity and territorial integrity of Ethiopia that compelled me to become deeply involved in Ethiopian politics. Politics is about taking a position that therefore creates a reaction from adversaries. Therefore, I never expected everybody to appreciate what I have done. It must be seen in context. The most important thing for me then and now was what I did, wrote, and said was all on behalf of the truth and with a clear conscience. I could not stand idly by and see the country fall apart, nor see the continued suffering of people under successive immoral regimes. That was not what over 300,000 soldiers died for in Ethiopia during my lifetime alone. So I developed the passion to do my part without doubts, questions, or fear for what I believed would be in the best interest of my people. My political life began in 1974 when the revolution was in the air in Addis Ababa. I held many posts in the next 11 years as recounted in my book, Red Tears. Most of us at senior levels did not live normal lives. It was constant stress and uncertainty, both at the political and personal level. Working under the regime was not working for that regime, as many skewed minds interpreted. Most civil servants and most people in various fields were honest, hard-working, well-meaning people who were trying to contribute under difficult circumstances. When the people who were not there at the time talk about those years, they remember only the Red Terror and some of the brutalities of the Derg. But most of the people I worked with believed in what they were doing and sacrificed their time, their energy, and livelihoods to save people's lives and to save the country. They had nothing to do with the evils that a few committed on behalf of a dictator and a misguided revolution. I have done so many things in these years I planned for tomorrow. But I never ceased to count my blessings for each present moment that added up years of an exciting life. I have never seriously complained about my life. I have always counted my blessings. Almost all the friends I grew up with, all of my friends I worked with in Eritrea as a junior officer, and all the troops I commanded have perished in the service of their country. Countless soldiers I visited on the front lines of Eritrea when I was governor are dead or disabled, poor, and living in miserable conditions in the streets of cities across Ethiopia. I have seen millions of my people starving, and I have seen hundreds of thousands dying of famine across Ethiopia. I was there, at the center of it, trying to mobilize an international effort to save their lives. I have been reduced to a state of helplessness at times when everything became unmanageable, and I have to simply watch so many needless deaths from hunger, the kind of hunger that could have been avoided. I have challenged my God at my lowest moments and asked why He was doing this. But I have also been able to pick up myself because there were so many things to be done. In moments of despair, I have shouted to the international community and challenged them on their own values. During the Great Famine, dubbed then as the largest international humanitarian operations since the Second World War, relentless efforts of my courageous team paid off in the end. The world answered and millions of lives were saved. People around Mengistu and cadres of the revolution were certain that I was in trouble, and at that time, being in trouble meant being jailed or that you suddenly disappear. They called me all sorts of names: a CIA agent, a counter-revolutionary, and many more. The vice president of the previous regime, Colonel Fissa Adesta, in his revealing and very informative detailed memoir, after 20 years of incarceration, acknowledged that had I not left the country as early as I did, I would have been killed or imprisoned. Mengistu and the hardliners had me in their sights because of my opposition to their high-handed policies in Eritrea, for embarrassing them at the time of the 10th anniversary with my exposure of the famine. Colonel Fissa confirms that I was to be eliminated, but I was steady. Oh my God, I knew there was something sinister in the making. I was one step ahead of Mengistu, and I got out. He has hated me for that to this day. Colonel Fissa Adesta, the vice president of the Times then, also wrote about the government's efforts to damage my reputation after my defection. He writes, I was assigned to be a chairman of the committee established to look into the accusations leveled against Dawit, and if it were possible to have him return to Ethiopia. The committee concluded that it was not able to find any evidence corroborating the accusations made against him. He wrote further, no matter how the government tried to accuse him and smear his image after he defected, there should be no doubt that Dawit Welde-Giorgis did a remarkable job by tirelessly working to mobilize the international effort to provide humanitarian assistance to those affected by severe drought and famine. His quick and effective response saved the lives of millions despite some conspiracies and efforts to sabotage the operation of the commission he was leading. I believe that he is an Ethiopian hero." Unquote. In other parts of his revealing memoir, he names some of the people who were behind the accusations and lies that forced many to be executed and others like me to flee the country. I will return to them later on in this book. During the earlier years of EPRDF's rule, a request was made to the government by my friends in Ethiopia, mostly the RRC staff, to investigate the allegations. This was made out of concern for my image and the image of the RRC. After 2 years of their request, When I was working in Rwanda in 1995, a certain Ato Kunfu, who I later found out was the chief of security of the TPLF, called me and told me the investigation and the audit has been completed, and Prosecutor General and 14 other agencies have signed on it. The audit and investigation cleared me of any corruption that the allegation made earlier by official government media was dismissed as total fabrication. He told me the official audit report was sent to Foreign Affairs and will be sent to me. It was sent to me through Ato David Johannes, who was then the Speaker of the APRDF Parliament. Many of the RRC staff who had faith in me were relieved and called me to congratulate me. Despite my bitter struggle against the politics of the TPLF, this case has never been used against me until after Prime Minister Abiy came to power. My adversaries, who wanted it to be true, still use these lies to score points against my opposition to the politics of Prime Minister Abiy. There is no achievement greater than saving lives, and that's what we did. With a remarkable dedication, efficiency, courage, and honesty, Mr. Kurt Jansen, Finnish international civil servant, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, assigned to oversee the humanitarian operation in Ethiopia, wrote in his book titled The Ethiopian Famine, quote, "Whatever Dawit's future as a political refugee, he remains the hero of the relief operation. Without him, it would have been impossible to achieve the aim of saving millions of people from death by starvation," unquote. Since I left the country, I took part in the 1989 attempt to remove Mengistu, led by Major General Fanta Balai, and when that failed, I took part in another attempt led by Brigadier General Gazmu. These also did not succeed. Eventually, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, TPLF, led a coalition that became the EPRDF and took power by sheer force with critical support from the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, in May 1991. At that time, I, like many others, believed that the agony of Ethiopia would be over. But it did not take long to find out Ethiopia's sovereignty and the unity of its people were under severe threat from the ethnocentric repressive regime of the TPLF, led by Meles Zenawi. Once again, I was involved in opposition politics, trying to dislodge the TPLF from power. In Red Tears, I have sufficiently explained my involvement in Ethiopian politics and the challenges I faced during the early years of the revolution until the end of 1985. Another book, Kudet Bedem Merit, is a detailed chronicle of the wars fought on the eastern Ogaden and northern fronts, Eritrea, until the emergence of the new government under the EPRDF. Now, in this book, I describe some aspects of my life in Ethiopia, not mentioned in Red Tears, but it is mostly about my life after I was forced to leave Ethiopia. I have discussed the process of the independence of Eritrea and tried to expose the truth and the lies with the hope that the two countries would peacefully coexist with the capacity of filtering the truth from the lies. War and propaganda go together. But when everything is over, sustained peaceful coexistence can only be achieved with the knowledge and acceptance of the truth. I have also written about Operation Moses, Operation Solomon, the operations conducted by Israel to evacuate the Beta Israelis from Ethiopia. I have written about Operation Moses, which took place in 1984 in my earlier book, Red Tears. Operation Solomon was conducted after I left when EPRDF was about to enter Addis Ababa. It was necessary to write about those because they had a lot to do with my defection from Ethiopia and the label I was given to tarnish my image, which is still stuck in the minds of many. This book is also about my experience from 25 years of work as an international freelance consultant in a number of conflict-ridden countries in Africa. After I left Ethiopia at the end of 1985, I worked in most of the major conflict areas of Africa except inside Somalia. These were all turbulent years for me, emotionally draining but rewarding in many ways. I have also written about the African youth, where we have more people under 18 than any continent. Of the total 1.35 billion people of Africa, 3/4 are under the age of 35. With grinding poverty and the proliferation of conflict and terrorism in much of Africa, the youth is at a loss. Under these circumstances, young Africans just flee anywhere without even a sense of direction, unwanted by the world that looted Africa's resources, despised, condemned, enslaved, insulted, abused, mutilated by organ traffickers. Millions of Africans have nowhere to go. They just wander like lost souls. They see the thousands dying in attempts to cross the Mediterranean or the Red Sea. They see and hear about thousands perishing in the Sahara and their long journey to reach the coast. But that does not really matter. They don't look back. It's death in either direction. I have been troubled by what many young Africans think of themselves in terms of their color, and written about it in a chapter titled Colorism. It is an intra-ethnic issue that thrives mostly amongst the youth of black people everywhere in the world. As a young defy the concept of black is beauty, which used to be fashionable in earlier decades, the bleaching industry has become one of the most successful enterprises in Africa. In this regard, I have written about my experience with Rasta movement, a subject I was allowed to study during the Derg times by traveling to most of the Caribbean states and followed up later in my life. I have written about truth and reconciliation and their failures in many African countries, and what TRC should be in Ethiopia in the context of ongoing ethnic political crisis. In my years of service, Ethiopia and Africa, the most painful part of my experience were the immense suffering I witnessed and the personal challenges I faced, including challenges with my own faith. From my experience as an army officer until today, my life and my career has continuously been about human sufferings. As if what I saw in Ethiopia were not traumatic enough, what I have seen subsequently reads like a catalogue of the worst of evil human beings have ever conceived. I came face to face with the horrific brutality of the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, where I was heading the emergency humanitarian operations. I worked as UN advisor in Sudan for 3 years, where I saw the most primitive life imaginable of the South Sudanese who were being displaced and killed time and time again. I worked in Darfur at a time when crimes against humanity were being committed by the Sudanese government and its allied Arab militia, the Janjaweed. I was in the midst of devastating 30-year war in Angola, where I worked for 4 years. I experienced the aftermath of a 17-year bloody civil war in Liberia, where I worked for 2 years. I saw the continuing massacres carried out by the Lord's Armed Resistance Army, LRA, in Uganda, where I worked for a year. I witnessed the humble, passive, and modest people of Madagascar, impoverished and brutalized by their own leaders, where I worked for 2 years. I witnessed the ongoing carnage in the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the terror of Al-Shabaab in Kenya, of Boko Haram in Nigeria, and the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, in Mali, about which I have written. I saw the Tuong Sen Genocide Museum in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, devoted to the brutality of the Khmer Rouge, who murdered 2 million people. I have seen millions suffering, displaced, and abducted by terrorists, some state-sponsored, which I have extensively written about, including on mainstream media of the USA and Africa. I have been shocked at the incapacity of the United Nations to maintain or enforce peace, which I refer in one of my chapters in this book titled Complicity with Evil, the deafening silence of those who have caused the conflicts and those who have the power and the resource to stop it cannot be sensibly explained. This series of tragedies have been depressing experiences, even more so because I continue to see the sufferings of millions as I write this book. The kind of suffering that is briefly captured in headlines or not talked about at all because it doesn't make money. As I go about my daily routine, the agonized voices of the millions of famine and war victims of Africa, people of faith, tormented in body, in mind, in spirit, follow me. I can hear their questions repeated over and over, asking me, why do we have to suffer? Why is God doing this to us? My conversations with the killers haunt me. I have watched their trials and taken part in reconciliation efforts. Many of these murderers regularly attended Sunday morning church services, then went out to kill in the afternoons. Some of them have refused to repent or take responsibility for what they have done, accusing instead God and challenging me, saying, why did God make us do this? Why did He not stop us? In some instances, these mass murderers who have slaughtered children in public or who have ordered the killings and brutalization of so many have become pastors after the war was over, like in Liberia. They now use God's name and think they are instruments of His will. These unredeemable criminals have publicly come out and declared that they have been saved, quote unquote, and called by God to save their people. What are we to make of all this? What could I reply when the survivors of these tragedies have asked me, why does God have to do these things to us? Why are poor, religious, innocent people become victims? Why? These experiences have confused me, and I was forced to question my faith. Why indeed? What possible reason could God have for allowing so much misery? I began to doubt. This is the internal argument that was tearing me apart, an argument which so many of us had, I'm sure. It has troubled me all my life. I've been wrestling with it to get an answer. Searching for an answer has consumed a bigger and bigger part of my life. Though the answers are elusive, I wanted to share this struggle with my readers. None of us can say definitely what the answer to the question is, but I have concluded that God has nothing to do with all this suffering. When I was able to take God out of it, I left comfortable and at peace with myself, and at least had something to tell the victims, the killers, and the survivors. But for me, one truth is undeniable. God uses ordinary people in extraordinary ways as a testimony of His grace and glory. Meeting and working with people like Mother Teresa strengthened my faith in humanity. I met Mother Teresa, now Saint Teresa, a few times in my life, and each time was special for me. Mother Teresa strengthened my faith in humanity at times when I was bitter about the indifference of the developed world that had the means to stop it and to help. It was a miracle that strong-minded person, armed with faith and love, could make so much difference in reducing the suffering of people. I have written about my experience with Mother Teresa in red tears, and in this book I have written more. Towards the end of this book, I deal with the current Ethiopian situation and its leadership. On the flip side,
አሁን አማርኛው በጣም አድቫንስ አድርጎ ብዙ ነገር መማር አለብኝና ስለዚህ አማርኛ ጥሩ ላይሆን ይችላል። አሁን ሴኩሪቲ ምን እንደሆነ አላውቅም በአማርኛ ደህንነትም አይደለም ጸጥታም አይደለም ግን ትንሽ የእንግሊዝኛው ሰፋ ይላል ሰፋ ይላልና ግን ዝም ብዬ ሴኩሪቲ ልበለው ለተገባ ሴኩሪቲ ልበለው እና የተሰጠኝ አርስ በጸጥታ በተመለከተ ነው። አንዳንድ ቦታ ለፍጥነት ስናገር ላራዝም ስለምችል አንዳንድ ቦታ ባለኝ አንዳንድ ቦታ አብራራለሁኝ እና
life is not about winning.
በጠቅላላው ያለንበት
downsides to life, then you would be less likely to count your blessings And if you don't count your blessings, you will never be content. The whole exercise of trying to make a difference in people's lives has been a great source of joy and fulfillment for me. Just trying with a success, like my father said, I would have failed if I had not tried. My body is aging, but my spirits are high, and I remain as motivated as I was in my younger years. In the last few years, I have focused on contributing articles to newspapers and journals, and I am experiencing the joy of reading, listening, and writing. I never thought I would reach this level of maturity, this advanced stage of life. For a junior army officer from the battlefields of Eritrea, it was quite a long journey. And even these waning years of my life, I feel the potential in me to do more, which means I can create the state of mind that allows me to be content and appreciate each moment for what it brings. In my life, I have been an officer, a paratrooper, a special force trainer in the Ethiopian Army, and have commanded troops in combat, been trained in the United States, in Ethiopia, and I have been a lawyer from Haile Selassie First University and later Columbia University, New York. I have been a UN humanitarian coordinator and disaster manager in Africa. I've been a diplomat, a politician, author of 4 books, and several published research works. I have met many heads of state and public figures. I have mostly, officially, formally visited 80% of the countries in the world. There were times when I have done crazy things besides normal parachuting while I was in the army. I have on my own folded my own parachute and jumped from small airplanes a few times in the United States. And in Africa, I have been a mountain climber, including Mount Kenya, Mount Meru, and finally Mount Kilimanjaro at the age of 65. I have attended flying school and tried to become a pilot, a profession that always fascinated me when I was a paratrooper. The pilots are amazed by our courage when we drop from the aircrafts they fly, and I was amazed by their skills. I tried rock climbing in Namibia, but found out that was not meant for me. I was a motorcyclist for a few years and traveled alone with my motorcycle across 8 countries in Africa. I've recently become a desert dune driver in the Battle of the Dunes in Namibia, and I've always been a dog lover. These extracurricular activities have added a little spice to my life. This book is the story of this life. It's about the times when events and people changed my life and the times when I changed other people's lives. It's about decisions I had to make, about living and working under difficult circumstances, and opinions I have formulated working in many African countries. It's not a memoir like Red Tears, but an autobiography which can only be written one time, as we have only one life. There may be an epilogue if I live long enough, and I have some stories worth sharing. Otherwise, this is how I lived the long life God has endowed me with. There is an afterword written by my friend and editor of the book, Dale Coy, PhD. It was one life, and I have lived it. It has been a rough and rewarding journey, but I believe that my life has been humbly consequential. I am ready.